Hey y'all, welcome and welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Morgan, and here we do a little bit of all things creepy. That was weird, right? Okay. Anyways, I post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we do all sorts of things. We talk about true paranormal experiences, both from myself and from you guys, which is what we're doing today. We talk about scary books, scary movies, we watch scary TikToks. We do it all. So if that sounds really fun, I would love to have you here. Now, like I said, we are going to be reading scary stories that you guys have sent in to me today. So with that being said, if you guys have any stories you would like for me to read in future episodes just like these, please send them to the email down in the description. And also in that description, you will find all of my other social media links and all that stuff. So with all that being said, let's read some scary stories, shall we? I absolutely love your channel and finally got the guts to share this with you. My best friend, who we will call CT, and I, in high school, had so many interesting situations. We would feel and hear and see other things that others could not. When we got to our senior year, she started dating someone a little older and she moved into an apartment with him. Being kids in high school with a place away from our parents, we would occasionally drink at that apartment, enjoying the freedom to be silly. We were stereotypical goth kids, so we of course started our journeys into becoming the practicing witches we are now, when we were teenagers, not aware of consequences to poor choices yet. One night we were playing a drinking game, myself, my friend, her boyfriend, who we will call BW, and my boyfriend at the time. We were quite intoxicated, and BW decided it was Ouija board time. Pause, backtrack. About 3 months prior, when they moved into the apartment, the door to that apartment was open, while we all brought things inside to help them move and unpack. While BW was alone in the living room, he had plopped the recliner down and sat for a moment, and a man walked in the door. He looked like he was a worker, but like he didn't belong in his surroundings. Almost like he was in an old sepia-toned photo. It was surrounded by the color of the world around him. He stood out. He walked past the recliner down the hall where he disappeared. When we came up the stairs, he tells us what he saw, and I mentioned he possibly lived there previously. Maybe he even helped build the apartment buildings, as they were built back in the 40s. We shared space with who we dubbed as Bob, just to have a moniker for what we were talking about. We would hear a man talking, not to us, just like we heard a conversation in another room. Would see him in dreams like it was just any normal daily interaction. Nothing crazy happened until that night. Now back to that night that we were drinking and had the Ouija board out. We spoke with various spirits and or entities, one of which said its name was Bob. So BW started asking questions about why he was here, and it spelled out BW's first name. That's not even what he goes by normally. He goes by his middle name, and then spelled out the word boo. At this point, he jumped out of his chair and ran outside of the apartment without saying goodbye. He sat on the bed of his truck crying for about 20 minutes and then described a pale creature made of flesh. Apparently it was gaunt and long-armed and legged, black shark-like eyes, sharp teeth, think venom. What still to this day, over 20 years later, makes my stomach flip is that he described it as perched next to him, initially out of the corner of his eye, and then it smiled in an eerie, cold way. Hello? PT and I spent much time from here banishing and cleansing and saging and salting absolutely everything. We finally convinced BW to come back inside and go get some sleep. I started to doze off on their couch. About an hour and a half later, I hear him getting sick in their adjoined bathroom. Then BW comes out of the room and sits next to me on the couch. He looked like all the blood had left his face. I asked if he was okay, and he looked at me slowly. He said that when he got sick, he saw something in his peripheral vision. He looked over and saw Bob perched on their bathroom counter. He grinned in a way that BW described as unnatural and wider than would have ever made any sense. And then he disappeared the same way he always did. He and I did not sleep anymore that evening and also left the bedroom door open so that he would see CT sleeping from the living room just to keep an eye on her. It was the most tense and terrifying thing I have ever experienced. Thankful as many first apartments are, this place was not fancy, so they ended up breaking their lease and moving out just after 4 months of living there. We rarely speak anymore as we had a falling out many years back. But before then, I had not heard them talk about anything to do with that again, so I'm guessing it was connected with that apartment or land it was built on. Okay, so that was definitely something pretending to look like that worker, right? To gain trust. It had to be, because that was not a human. That was not a human spirit. There's no way. Ew. Okay, next story. I moved into a new apartment a few months ago, having never lived anywhere that's not haunted and possibly bringing ghosts from my old apartments. I was expecting maybe some noises or stuff moving, but nothing like this. There's the usual knocking and footstep noises, which are probably from the old apartment's ghosts who are harmless and used to do that. They got upset when I was moving and made more and more closer and different noises, so I offered them to come with me, of course with rules, like they can't hurt me or the cats. However, the first night I heard that, also the exact same noises my dad usually makes, the exact same breathing, and the way he would move things. I would also hear the cats scratch, play, and move stuff when they were both sleeping next to me. One of my cats would sit on the table at night, looking into the hallway and meowing. Something in a way like she wanted something, other times in a chanting with something type of way. For a while, the cats would insist on following me to the bathroom at night as if protecting me. I would also hear the cats scratching on the furniture a lot when they were sleeping next to me. Stuff would go missing and be moved too, feelings of being watched and sometimes followed like something is right behind me, something bad. Cleansing did help with the stuff, though it didn't fully get rid of it, at least the bad stuff. Occasionally knocking or tapping noises. I also locked my mirrors and put up protections and such. But jumping to one of the weird occurrences. I was in my room just laying in bed and I looked towards the window and saw this ball of light flying towards me, like if someone was outside and threw a flashlight or a burning basketball at my window. It hit the window and let out a loud boom. The cats didn't seem to care, but I was confused but not scared. It went into the curvature line of someone throwing a ball, like up and then slightly down while still moving forward. There was no one outside and the window was fine, but I have no clue what that was. No one else I've talked to seems to know either. A little added context, I live on the second floor and it was late in the city. Everything outside that window is in a small parking lot between buildings. That's weird. I don't know what that could be. The second weird thing. I was yet again in bed trying to rest when in front of me, that same window, but inside, between the window and my bed, I hear a female voice say a word I can't even remember. I remember the word having a C, H, and S in it, not necessarily in that order, but sounding a bit like Chiquita. I also feel like the word circle might have been said. I remember repeating it in my head, although it wasn't in any language I recognized. I heard it repeated in my head a few times and instantly fell asleep. I couldn't remember the exact word after waking up. A little addition, I randomly smelled the exact smell of one of my dad's vapes last night. I think it was the vanilla one. I don't know exactly. It was random and only a particular spot around my bed. Any help with what this fireball was and with why my dad and cat noises were mimicked and what the weird word could mean is much appreciated. I'm trying to think because the fireball, literally no idea. I've heard of strange lights, but like one coming at you like that and like physically hitting a window with that velocity makes me wonder if it's something like cryptid related because they're more physical. The mimicking and stuff could also be cryptid related, so that could all go together. Have you put up iron anywhere? Maybe try that to ward things off, especially above that window. I don't like that window. All right, next story. For this email, I think I'll focus more on my work with Lucifer and Aries. I never hear stories of people that work with Aries. Oh, I'm excited. So I started working with Lucifer nearly a year ago. At first, I thought it was Hades that was reaching out to me. I've heard that a lot, that people mix them up whenever one's reaching out. I finally put up an altar and the next day I started to feel sick, like nauseous, headaches, full body chills, the works. I didn't get what was going on for the longest time. After around a week, I got desperate and tried taking down the altar and everything stopped. I still knew that someone was reaching out to me, so I asked for a sign. The next few days I started to see a lot of ravens everywhere and most noticeably wasps. The wasps seemed random, especially because they didn't seem to have any meaningful connection to Lucifer. The thing is, I once went down a rabbit hole and deep dived into Christian beliefs with my focus on the so-called devil and its origin. That's how I learned about Lucifer. Having seen the series Lucifer before, it was easy to obsess over my newfound knowledge. Anyways, back to the wasps. I really liked them. The thing is, everyone seemed to hate them and go as far as to associate them with the devil and or claim the devil created them. I would always smile and roll my eyes at that. In my experience, wasps are actually fairly peaceful and misunderstood creatures. So back to the story. I started seeing them everywhere, like in school, at home, on the bus, and random shops. It was during a fairly cool time in October and November. Now, there were actually two major events that made me realize that the wasps were a sign I was asking for. One of them was early in the morning, and I was sitting in the bus on my way to school. It was cold outside, like seeing your breath cold. I'm sitting in the bus, and it stops because of traffic. The place I was sitting at came to a stop next to a stop sign, and as I looked out the window and onto that sign, a wasp suddenly lands on the red of the sign. It just chills there until the bus starts driving again. At first, the wasp kept pace with the bus until it got too fast and I lost sight of the little insect. The other thing is that the wasp started to appear in my classroom when I was especially anxious or near a panic attack. It was important to mention that I have a fear of going to school. I'm still working on it. It comes from a lot of bad experiences throughout my life. Those wasps could always land on the window near my seat in class. Sometimes they'd even land on my desk or land on my hand. They'd be very calm and sweet. So after a bit of experimentation and asking to send more wasps if I was communicating with Lucifer and that happened, I put up an altar for him, and I already told you about my experience with him a bit, so let's get into Aries. I always admired Greek mythology. In May, I would start obsessing over Aries like out of nowhere. He would be on my mind 24/7, and I started to get the urge to put up another altar. So I did. The first time I lit both of their candles at the same time, they started to flicker like crazy. The flames were huge and black smoke was rising. That never happened before, and they both did it almost aggressively. That scared me. I felt bad and so guilty. I was near tears. When I started talking to Lucifer, telling him that I was sorry and that I probably should have asked or informed him of my decision, both candles started to calm down. I think he wasn't angry at me, but more like trying to figure out the intentions Aries had. After that, things were calm, and they actually seem to get along great now. For me, they are like big brothers I always wanted. Aries especially has helped me with a lot of my fears of going to school. He gives me confidence of being able to face the huge fear. Both of them give me the confidence of expressing myself freely, especially the way I dress. So now I walk through school in a very conservative area with neon green hair, dark makeup, violet lips, and clothes I feel comfortable and bad in. I now have the confidence to stand up for myself and for my rights and beliefs. I proudly wear my shoelaces that are in colors of the asexual flag, and I'm less afraid of what other people might think of me. One instance that stands out to me is that we were having a discussion in class about abortion. I know that this is a very tricky topic. I have this one girl in class who's extremely Christian. She's super against it. During the discussion, it turns out that she wouldn't even allow her own hypothetical daughter, the daughter was 13, in an attempt to make her see reason, to get an abortion after being assaulted and becoming pregnant. So yeah, a girl sucks. Normally, I would not have been able to speak up to defend my beliefs, but in this instance, I could feel Aries and Lucifer both standing behind me, and I swear Aries was shaking with rage. I could literally feel it. The way adrenaline spiked through my body and everything in me geared up to fight. If it weren't for Lucifer, it probably would have turned into a screaming match at her. In the end, the two of us spent the whole hour debating about it, with her saying crap and me shooting her down her ridiculous opinions with stuff that had her struggling more and more with finding a reason why abortion is so bad. Anywho, I never felt so powerful and supported like in that moment. Another thing that happened was that I went to a barbecue with a friend that she organized. I knew no one except my mom and my friend. There was this huge Rottweiler that immediately came up to me as soon as I got there. He wasn't acting as if we had known each other our whole lives. Later I learned that his name was Aries. Now let's get into the thing that happened when I spent my holiday on Rhodes Island, Greece. I was so excited. The whole place felt very powerful, so I was enjoying the holiday, but every now and then I got this feeling when I saw something pretty, like I was drawn to it. So in the end, I took a really pretty shell and a piece of rose quartz with me, and we left. When we saw both, I always had to think that Aphrodite would like that. I actually visited a temple of hers. When I was there, all I could think of was the stuff I picked up was for her, and the name of one of my classmates, let's call her S, who I learned like a month prior had an altar for her. So I was standing there in front of her temple thinking about S and the gifts. And as soon as school started, I told S and she gave her that stuff. No idea if Aphrodite liked it, but I felt very proud after completing my task, so it really doesn't matter. Something else that I wanted to mention is that I suck about lighting the candles or giving offerings. Like, I legitimately forget that the altars exist. I always feel bad about it because I suck at working with Aries and Lucifer. Instead, I try to include them as much as possible into my daily life. I always wear a necklace dedicated to each of them, and I talk to them either out loud or in my head. They seem to know and don't seem to care. To this day, they give me huge, big brotherly vibes, and I love it. My room feels safe, and I don't feel as alone as I used to. These are the most notable experiences I've had with them. Hope you like them, and sorry that this is so long. That was insane. The wasp one is crazy. That's the thing, too. Whenever you ask for, signs, it'll usually be something catered towards you, so you won't really find information about it online. You know what I mean? I remember when Lilith was reaching out to me, I had genuinely no idea. Like, my knowledge of her literally stopped at supernatural, because at least in my Christian church, we weren't taught about Lilith at all. So I had no idea any signs she was putting towards me for all these years, and it literally took her scaring me for me to be like, something's wrong. Like, it literally took her presenting herself in a scary way for me to clock it. But now I look back at all of the things, especially like spiders, me seeing certain things, and I'm like, okay, like the spiders, the owls, snakes, I get it. Now I see it, but I didn't. So it's not uncommon for them to, pick something like that. That would make sense. Those were lovely stories. All right, next story. I live in the same house that I've lived in all my life, and I've known as far back as I can remember that place is haunted. It's almost 40 years old and just south of Illinois-Wisconsin border. The first little story, the hallway. As a small child, one of my earliest memories was walking down the hallway between the bedrooms and the living room and hearing a hissing voice saying my name like it was trying to entice me to come over to it. The voice seemed to be coming from inside the walls and ceiling. I couldn't pinpoint it. I ran out of there into the other room where my parents were as fast as I could, and for years after that, I was utterly terrified of going into that hallway alone. The basement. When I was a little older, my dad built me a playroom in our partially finished basement. It had a concrete floor with leftover carpet squares for area rugs. I got so used to the spiders that I barely noticed them until one day everything was normal 1 minute, and the next I had a dozen of daddy long-legged spiders crawling all over me. I was used to seeing 1 or 2 at a time, but not like this. It was like someone or something sent them. My best friend and I were playing in the finished part of the basement, which was one long, narrow room with wood paneling halfway up the wall and ugly brown carpet. We were kind of roughhousing a little, probably acting out a scene from some anime or something, when I got pushed to the floor. I specifically got pushed because I definitely didn't just fall. Something knocked me to the ground. When I looked up, my friend, the only other person there, was way over at the other end. There was no possible way she could have done that, not from that far away, and not without me seeing or hearing. The doll. From when I was a little girl, I had a talking DW doll from the PBS kids show Arthur. I didn't like her much, so she mostly sat turned off on the top of my bookshelf, but she turned on and started talking by herself more than once. I told my parents and they took her batteries out. It kept happening even with the batteries out. The only thing I could think of is that she had someone or something inside of her just using her trying to communicate. But it creeped me out, and we eventually sold her in a garage sale. The garage door. When I was in college, I was staying up late working on homework, local university still living at home, and I went out to the kitchen to get a snack. I heard what sounded like the garage door going up, but it was after midnight. All of us were home. I thought I was hearing things, and then I heard it go back down. I went to the inside garage door to make sure the outer one was down, and I watched it go back up. It kept going up and down for several minutes, so I woke up my parents and told my dad, and he went out there to make sure no one was trying to get in. This isn't a neighborhood where everyone has the same brand and model of garage door either. After that, we started locking both the garage door and the door from the garage to the family room. Ugh! Those were great, though. I loved those stories. What? Those were like fun classic haunted house stories. Alright, next one. I've been listening to your channel for a while now and tried sending an email, but it seemed you didn't see it. I hope this gets to you. I noticed you haven't shared any stories from Nigeria, so I thought I'd send one. I grew up hearing. I'm lucky or blessed not to have experienced anything paranormal firsthand besides some terrifying dreams I've managed to force myself out of by praying. This one is my grandfather's story. It's not the scariest you probably heard, but it stayed with me for years, and considering the way he told it, I thought it was worth sharing, so let me get into it. My mom's family is originally from, it's Osun, Osun State, famous for its worship of the river goddess Osun. I'm assuming it's Osun. Wife of the thunder god Sango. The Osun River flows through the region, and its spiritual power runs deep in the Yoruba tradition. Yoruba? I'm so sorry if I'm saying any of this wrong. At some point, the family migrated to Côte d'Ivoire? Côte d'Ivoire? I'm not saying any of this right, I fear. And settled there. My mom was born there, so we've got relatives on both sides of the border. Nigeria is a deeply spiritual community. Religion, superstition, and tradition beliefs coexist side by side. And unfortunately, so do people who practice the darker sides of these traditions. One of the most infamous is money rituals. That's where my grandfather's nightmare began. He was skilled, humble, and hard-working tailor. He had years of working in the Ivory Coast, and he sent money back to his brother in Nigeria to build him a house. It was supposed to be their family's home when they returned. But when my grandfather brought his wife and 2 kids, my mom and uncle, back to Nigeria, the house wasn't for him. His own brother had used his money to build a house for himself, and he refused to let my grandfather's family stay there. Stranded in Lagos with nowhere to go, my grandparents worked whatever jobs they could find just to feed the children. They were homeless for a time. One of the customers mentioned an uncle with a vacant house, and the place was empty, the man said, and they could stay there for a while. My grandfather was grateful, but cautious. Why would a whole house sit unused? The man said his uncle had multiple properties and traveled often. It seemed plausible. Well, desperate, my grandfather agreed, but decided to stay there alone for a week to make sure it was safe before moving the rest of the family in. The first night he had a dream. He saw a young woman walking the halls of the house, selling fried bean paste cakes. She was calling out to people to buy her food, her voice echoing softly in the night. When he woke up, he felt completely drained, but he brushed it off. Then the same dream came again the next night, and the night after that. By the fourth night, he realized something terrifying. It wasn't a dream. The voice was real. It was inside the house, inside the walls. The house itself seemed to be whispering to him the same call to buy this. It echoed through the halls, followed by slow, bare footsteps. And the fifth night, he made a mistake. He closed his bedroom door. That's when her voice changed, no longer soft, no longer kind. She slammed against the door, screaming in a distorted voice, shaking the walls with each blow. The whole house trembled as she demanded. My grandfather couldn't move. He stayed frozen in bed, reciting verses from the Quran over and over until morning came. Of course, while this was all happening, my grandmother noticed something was wrong. He wasn't sleeping, he wasn't eating, he was snapping at everyone. She offered to return to the Ivory Coast to work and send money, while he stayed with the kids in Nigeria. He didn't want to agree, but he still had one more night left in that house. And that night changed everything. Around 3 or 4 in the morning, the footsteps came again. They called to buy food, the same pattern, but this time my grandfather snapped. He waited until he heard her right outside his door, and then he flung it open, yelling at her to leave him alone. But what he saw silenced him immediately. It was a young and beautiful woman, barely in her 20s. Her hair was neatly braided, her wrapper carefully tied, but she was covered in blood. Her neck was open at an angle, and the heavy tray of food dug into her skull, forcing her head into a grotesque, unnatural tilt. I was barely holding on. They stared at each other for a second, and then they both screamed. My grandfather said he doesn't remember how he left the house. He just ended up back with my grandmother, trembling. Later, they found out the truth. The house belonged to the customer's uncle. Years ago, he had hired a young woman selling things off the street, claiming he would buy the entire tray. He took her to a native doctor who used her flesh and blood to cook a meal for a ritual. Her remains were buried under the house's foundation, and her spirit was bound to continue selling her food forever, bringing wealth to the man every time someone heard her. Eventually, the man went insane. He wandered into traffic one day and was crushed by a truck. That's often how these stories end for blood money rituals, madness and a violent ending. After that, my grandmother returned to the Ivory Coast alone. My mom and uncle stayed in Nigeria with my grandfather until he saved enough to rent a proper apartment. Eventually, my grandmother came back, and they had 2 more kids, my aunts. That's my first story, and I hope it made sense. I'm working on becoming a novelist, so I might have slipped into storytelling mode here and there, but I promise everything I shared with you is what I was told growing up. If you'd like to hear more, and trust me, there's plenty more from Nigeria, please just let me know. And if you ever have any questions about the culture or context, I'd be happy to provide further. Thank you for doing what you do. It means so much to those who've carried those stories quietly, never knowing if or where they could be shared. You're giving voices to what's been long whispered in the dark, and in doing so, you're keeping the power of oral storytelling alive. Okay. That was an incredible story. First of all, that poor woman. I wonder if there's some way she can be unbound. Like, is there a witch that can go in there and do that? Because I volunteer to try. There's got to be some way we can unbound her spirit, because that is horrific. Oh my God. Has anyone tried? I need to know. Yes, on the more stories, please. I'm just thinking about that woman now. Oh, Jesus. You can call me Ash, and I've been debating if my stories were even worth sharing or not, but I decided to send in a few short ones. If you want to hear more, I'd be happy to share. I have too many to fit into one message. I love your videos, and I binge watch your story reading playlist. I've seen almost all of them at this point. I really enjoy your videos, and funnily enough, they comfort me when life gets rough. I can't tell you how glad I am that I found your channel. I'm gonna start crying before this video ends. I hope my stories aren't too boring. Anyway, let's talk the stories. Your stories are never going to be too boring to send. Send them all in. For context, I've always been sensitive. I guess I've always heard stuff, seen stuff, and felt stuff. I also have ADHD, so sorry if I ramble. I forget to take my medicine before writing this. All my stories take place in Houston, Texas, or Missouri City, Texas. More specifically, Sienna Plantation. I'm the most sensitive in my house, but a few people on my mom's side are also sensitive. Story number 1, Raccoon Friends. As far back as I can remember, I've always seen these lights. No matter where, no matter when, they were always there. They come in many different colors. Orange, purple, red, pink, yellow, green, white, light blue, you name it. They're always bright and vibrant and always playful and warm, almost comforting. When I was little, just started talking, I would call them my raccoon friends. They look nothing like raccoons, but the name stuck. My mom said she always assumed that they were just imaginary friends. a typically overreactive imagination of a child. It was so long ago, I thought it was normal. My brain never really took note of the times I saw them. A few instances from early childhood I do remember, though. One day I was in my grandma's yard. There was at the time a tall tree in the center of the yard. It looked like a V. It was one of those trees that split at the stump and both sides grew up and away from each other. I was around 5 years old and I was getting grass to add to whatever me and my sister were making. There was a lot of raccoon friends flying around that tree in the yard. They were bright and I could tell they were from nature. Those are fae. Those are definitely fairies. Another time I was in the bathroom and there was a purple raccoon friend floating next to me close to the ground. I reached out and touched it. It was warm, like putting your hand above a pot of boiling water. It didn't leave, it didn't disappear, it didn't even move. I called my mom and my sister, I can't remember which. I thought they would see it and want to pet it too, but they saw nothing. They just nodded along, but I could tell they didn't believe me. Now fast forward to 2018. My family had moved from Houston to Siena to Missouri City. That's when I stopped seeing them. I said they moved away. I didn't see them for years, but I have stories from that time. Recently, around 2024, I slowly started seeing them again. My mom believes they're real, and I see them every day. It's back to being the norm. No one else sees them or feels them, but they're always there, floating through the room. I think they tend to hover around me the most. It feels like they watch over me, like they protect me. I don't know for sure what they are, but me and my mom theorized that they could be fairies or something like that. I want to hear your thoughts and opinions on them. What do you think they could be? Thank you for reading one of my stories, and I'm sorry if it wasn't scary. Listen, that was more wholesome, but I love a fairy story. That's definitely what I think that is. I think you guys were spot on, for sure. Okay, I guess we will end it there. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, sending me your stories, and listening to these stories. I will see you on Friday when we react and watch some scary TikToks. There is a bug behind my camera. What kind of bug are you? Oh, it's a potato bug. Come here, my friend. Come here, my friend. It's on my mic. It won't crawl on me. Come, come. Come, come. Okay, why you no crawl on me? Come on. Come on. It did it. Do you guys want to see it? Okay, bye guys.